Undead are those who cannot die even when killed. They are immortal beings who have escaped the cycle of life and death. For them, dominating an entire dimension is not difficult. They believe that conquering what is called Earth is merely a matter of time. Everything seems to go smoothly according to the plans of the undead. However, deep in the midst of the battle, a calm young man steps forward. The undead are astonished and cannot believe their eyes as they exclaim in disbelief that he is just a human and should not be alive. Kang Hyun, engulfed in fierce flames, replies that it is because he is stronger than them. Then, he easily wields his sword and dispatches each of the undead. 2 years earlier, Kang Hyun was just an unemployed man living off his younger sister. Kang, a Hyun furious, looks at her useless brother, wishing she could kick him out immediately. She suppresses her anger and lets Kang Hyun know she is allowing him to stay because he says he is job hunting, but he just wastes time drinking and gaming. Pointing to the door, Kang, a Hyun, loudly tells him to go back to their parents' house if he continues this way. Kang Hyun hesitates, wanting to explain that at his age he can't keep depending on their parents. His sister interrupts and asks if depending on his younger sister is any better. Before Kang Hyun turns to leave, Kang, a Hyun, reminds him that it's New Year's Day tomorrow and you should look for a part-time job or do something productive. Kang Hyun whispers, all right, I'll think about it tomorrow. My head is spinning now." Returning to his room and closing the door tightly, Kang Hyun can still hear his sister scolding outside. He wonders why his life is so miserable and what kind of life he will lead in the future. The only thing he has done since coming to Seoul is a short internship at a large corporation. Kang Hyun thinks to himself that he should also find a suitable job. Lying in bed and looking at the bright screen, Kang Hyun realizes he forgot to turn off the game before logging out. He laments how wonderful real life would be if it were like a video game. If that were the case, he could have a good job as a warrior, mage, or swordsman. Drifting off to sleep, Kang Hyun sees a status window before his eyes displaying a message about a detected common connection from the Haken dimension. The Earth's defense system begins to activate. Startled awake, Kang Hyun finds himself in a different place, puzzled by the floating text before his eyes. The status window appears again, displaying the message. Time until connection to the Haken dimension is completed. 4 years, 364 days, 23 hours, and 59 minutes. Next, the window welcomes Kang Hyun to the tutorial, which consists of 8 stages. Additionally, he learns that death here does not affect reality. Once the tutorial is completed, he will be awakened and rewarded. Kang Hyun, holding his head, thinks to himself that this must be just a dream, the kind only a serious gamer like him could have. He silently apologizes to his parents and promises his sister that he will look for a job as soon as he wakes up. Kang Hyun's emotions change as quickly as the wind. He smiles joyfully, not caring that this is just a dream. He believes it is a sign from God telling him to play all out one last time. The window once again updates, announcing the start of Stage 1, hoping that Kang Hyun's bravery is sufficient to save the Earth. To complete the challenge, you must cross a bridge and failure results in death. Kang Hyun looks around but sees no bridge. Yet, in a moment, the scene before him begins to change. Fire surrounds Kang Hyun, and the only way out is across a fragile bridge. He steps back in fear, with lava below the flames. Alongside Kang Hyun, several others appear and he does not know who they are. He doubts this bizarre dream. At that moment, he hears his sister's voice next to him calling out to him. Confused, he looks towards his sister, wondering how she could appear in his dream. This is indeed too absurd. Kang Hyun clings to a rock face, avoiding the steaming lava beneath, and asks her brother if this is really a dream. She then mentions something about saving the Earth, which she doesn't understand at all. Even in the dream, Kang Hyun continues to excel at being useless. He tells his sister not to act as if this is her dream because it is his. Kang Hyun, annoyed, snaps back, asking if that really matters now. She starts analyzing if it were really a dream, then the lava could not possibly be this hot. Moreover, their conversation flows too naturally for it to be just a dream. Kang Hyun asks her brother if he doesn't find anything suspicious. Kang Hyun, tired of his sister's nagging, steps forward on his own, eager to complete the challenge. Kang Hyun looks at her brother with a fearful expression and asks if he isn't afraid of falling down below. He laughs loudly and asks his sister if she's out of her mind, claiming it's just a dream and if he dies, he will surely wake up. As Kang Hyun finishes his sentence, a loud noise comes from the rock above them, trying to appear calm in front of his sister. Kang Hyun's voice trembles as he says the scream sounds a bit real, but he isn't scared. Kang Hyun dismisses his brother's cowardly demeanor. She slowly crawls across the bridge, reminding her brother to be careful, suggesting that crawling might be safer. The two of them continue to crawl across the bridge, with Kang Hyun filled with doubts. Kang Hyun insists it's just an unreal dream. She looks at her brother again, questioning if such a dream could truly exist, and asserts that something must be happening that they can't imagine. Kang Hyun continues, suggesting that if they die here, it's likely they won't be able to return to the real world. Kang Hyun cries out, calling his sister a wretch, asking why she keeps bringing it up. Now his whole body is so frightened that he can't move. Kang Ahayan thinks he must be the most unreliable brother on earth. Seeing her brother wanting to lie down on the bridge, too afraid to go on, she asks if he plans to just lie there. Kang Hyun, deceiving himself, still insists it's just a dream. But the system doesn't give the siblings time to continue arguing. The difficulty suddenly increases and large cracks start appearing on the bridge leading down to the lava below. Kang Hyun yells at his sister to run. Eventually, they complete the challenge set by the system. The next morning, waking up, Kang Hyun thinks he had a bizarre dream. However, to his surprise, many people on social media are talking about a dream last night similar to the one he and his sister had. Kang Hyun, panicked, runs into her brother's room talking about the strange dream from last night. She loudly states that they walked on lava and nearly died, and it wasn't just a dream. It's important that both of them had the same dream, including a status window. It isn't until they sit down at the breakfast table and see what's happening on social media that they can confirm last night wasn't just a dream. It appears that people all over the world had the same dream. Kang Hyun holds his phone in his hand and forces a smile, guessing that dying in the game doesn't affect reality. Many people fell into the lava below, yet no one was hurt. However, it felt incredibly real, and falling would surely hurt like death. Kang Hyun looks at her brother and asks if it's okay for them to be eating normally while chaos ensues outside. Kang Hyun puts down his chopsticks and listens to the noise outside. They couldn't do much other than eat properly. He stands up, walks to the window, and pulls aside the curtain to look at the chaotic scene outside, asking his sister if she wants to jump into that crowd. Both understand that they cannot go out to work today. Going outside would only result in getting hurt. Kang Hyun turns back inside and asks his sister if she remembers anything about the connection to the Haken dimension. His sister counters by asking if he had not carefully read the status, right? They had been provided information that at least they could check the remaining time when temporarily awakened. Whatever it is, they still have 5 years until it ends. Kang Hyun looks at the chaotic street outside but believes that people will soon calm down, suggesting that it's best they stay inside for now. Kang Hyun silently thinks it's rare for her brother to speak so sensibly. Just as he said, by evening, the chaos of the morning had subsided and the streets had become quiet. By night, most people had returned to their normal lives. Thanks to this, South Korea stabilized again in just one day. Thus, the first day ended. Kang Hyun once again falls asleep, quickly checking his status board. Looking at the indices on the screen, Kang Hyun is unsure if they are at an acceptable level, since he has no one to compare and evaluate them with. He looks at the magic index line, wondering if he could use magic. His eyes then catch a more interesting term, resurrection skill. Kang Hyun laughs loudly, thinking this seems like an overwhelming cheat ability. Great, his life is no longer that of a surplus person. The status board continues to ask Kang Hyun if he wants to start stage 2. Kang Hyun replies of course, whether his stats are high or low, he can still level them up. At this point, he remains excited about possessing a resurrection skill without thinking about what might happen next. In stage 2, Kang Hyun needs to defeat enemies and prove his skills. He thought it would be like a battle in a game system. Kang Hyun managed to take down a goblin with a club, but the feeling of defeating a living creature made his whole body shiver. He curses under his breath, feeling like he's about to vomit. Kang Hyun knew he could win because it was just a goblin. If it hadn't attacked by surprise, he might have been the one lying there. Just as he finishes his thought, another goblin soldier appears in front of him, this one much larger. He fears, thinking aren't goblins supposed to be low-level monsters for beginners? Yet this one is twice the size of the last, wielding a sword over a meter long. The club Kang Hyun had chosen now seems useless. With a body weakened from long-term unemployment and lack of exercise, Kang Hyun can't withstand the opponent's attack. Worse yet, after reducing Kang Hyun to half his health, the goblin doesn't kill him but drags his body away. Kang Hyun curses, wondering when he will wake up from this nightmare. At this point, he just hopes someone will come and rescue him from this situation. Kang Hyun had never paid attention to how much blood a human body held until he confirmed it with his own blood. The fear of death slowly overwhelms Kang Hyun's mind. He must endure it until he stops breathing completely. Kang Hyun wakes up after being tortured to death by 4 goblins. Even though he has escaped the system, Kang Hyun is still trembling with fear. Kang Hyun, concerned, asks if he died from losing too much blood. Kang Hyun, needing a glass of water, recounts the horrific events to his sister. First, they capture him to pull out each fingernail and toenail and smash them. Unsatisfied, they even pulled out his teeth. His sister covers her ears, horrified, not wanting to hear anymore. After a while, she asks if he needs to go to the hospital. She heard that the number of patients in the psychiatric ward had doubled in the past 2 days. Perhaps others have experienced similar ordeals. Kang Hyun doesn't think he needs a hospital, but the bigger truth is he has no money. He hears some good news from his sister. Once someone dies, the tutorial ends, but those who die in the first stage will not dream of the second stage anymore. In stage 2, Kang Hyun is again faced with the challenge of overcoming enemies in his dreams. He thought if he could endure, he might escape the dream, but it seems not feasible. Eventually, Kang Hyun has to do what he dreads. Going to pick weapons for the battle, Kang Hyun stops to consider his options. Last time he chose a club because it seemed strong and easy to use, but it proved ineffective. This time, he decides to take a bow and a spear. Full of confidence, he goes into battle, but once again, he fails to hit the enemy with the arrows. Realizing the bow is ineffective, Kang Hyun switches to the spear, easily stabbing a goblin. However, with the second goblin attacking, he finds he can't pull the spear out of the body of the goblin lying on the ground. Once again, he dies with just one hit. Kang Hyun tells himself that he must try harder next time. Tutorial Stage 2, Round 3 opens. Today he chooses his sword and shield. Using a familiar weapon would be better, but he doesn't choose the spear as he spent all day learning the sword. However, in the battle of Round 3, Kang Hyun is immediately overwhelmed and killed by a group of goblins. Furious, he wakes from the dream, vowing vengeance against them all. Kang Hyun re-enters the tutorial for Stage 2, Round 4, swinging his sword randomly to increase his stats. He resolves to swing his sword for 8 hours to level up. After gaining 2 stat increases, Kang Hyun decides to take revenge on the goblins. But exhausted from overtraining, he fails to kill even one goblin and dies within moments. Learning from previous attempts, Kang Hyun continuously trains for 10 hours. Now, defeating the 2 goblins in front of him becomes much easier. Yet he still feels that his physical strength and combat skills are inadequate against the remaining goblins. Tutorial Stage 2, Round 7 opens. Kang Hyun simply swings his sword repeatedly, thereby developing basic swordsmanship. The abilities of basic swordsmanship help adjust his stance and save energy when swinging the sword, making his attacks more effective. Kang Hyun joyously exclaims that he's done it. Today the goblins will die. In Stage 2 of the guide, there were a total of 5 goblins. 2 were at the beginning of the fortress and 3 were in the latter half of the forest. For Kang Hyun, equipped with his current strength, the first 2 goblins were fairly easy to defeat. He ambushed the first one with a crossbow and dispatched the second with a sword. The main challenge, however, was the 3rd goblin in the forest. He could use the same strategy to eliminate the next 2, but the obstacle remained the final one. During the fight, Kang Hyun couldn't believe he was able to see his attack coming. It felt as if his body reacted before his mind had time to process. He suddenly realized this was the effect of the basic swordsmanship. Yet, there was another problem, as Kang Hyun was exhausted and had lost much stamina dealing with the previous 4 goblins. In a moment of carelessness, he dropped his sword. Nonetheless, Kang Hyun managed to smile, realizing this goblin didn't want to kill him immediately, but rather torment him predictably. Seizing a moment of inattention from the goblin, Kang Hyun picked up a large rock from the ground and struck it. The goblin, in pain and confusion, didn't have time to react before receiving another blow, leading to its death. The system then congratulated Kang Hyun on completing Stage 2, rewarding him with 5 bonus points and a weapon. Looking up at the clear sky, he shouted in victory, proclaiming the power of the Supreme Being. Awakening energized on a fresh morning, having completed Stage 2, he decided to make breakfast to celebrate. His sister, astonished, opened the bedroom door asking what he was talking about. At that moment, both received a system notification that the guide for Earth had completed activating the dungeon. Only awakened individuals could access the dungeon. After its emergence, the world turned chaotic. Initially, the siblings decided to stay indoors to review and organize some information. Sitting in front of the computer, Kang Hyun told his sister that it seemed the guide hadn't completely ended. Recently, those who turned 18 also participated in completing the guide. Kang Hyun informed her brother that social media was in turmoil due to the dungeon's appearance. People criticized the hasty decision to label those who completed the guide as awakened and send them to the dungeon. Kang Hyun mused that there were a total of 8 stages in the guide. It appeared that while he was trying to finish Stage 2, others had already completed all stages. Kang Hyun glanced at his sister's screen and asked if she could see anything related to Stage 3. Kang Hyun replied that there was nothing at all, no information, not even much about Stage 2. Kang Hyun looked at his sister again and asked if he should fight again. Now stronger, he also wouldn't be defeated as easily as before. Kang Hyun confidently believed he would complete Stage 3 stylishly and accurately. In the evening the guide for Stage 3 began. Kang Hyun never imagined he would be jumped by a minor monster. Angrily, he cursed and vowed to kill it, calling it a damned creature. In Stage 3, players are required to improve their perseverance and patience in all situations. The completion condition was to defeat the leader Gurkha. A tip suggested that if Kang Hyun waited long enough, an opportunity would arise. The system equipped him with a camouflage suit which Kang Hyun found absolutely fantastic. He guessed this might be a mission involving infiltration or assassination. Speaking of the leader Gurkha, Kang Hyun had never heard of this monster before, so his first decision was to go and find it. Before embarking on the mission, he checked what he had gained from Stage 2. Kang Hyun's eyes lit up as he looked at his status window, laughing loudly, saying the status window should look like this. Among the new skills he acquired were shield and crossbow usage. As for additional stats, Kang Hyun decided to increase his strength and stamina as they were useful at the moment. He considered whether to add 2 agility points just in case. Finally, the best item he received was a sword, the most wonderful thing he had gotten from the system. After checking everything, Kang Hyun set off to find Gurkha. He hid in the bushes, thinking of Carlos Hathcock, a legendary Navy sniper who successfully assassinated a major general after crawling over a kilometer in 3 days. From today, Hathcock was the person Kang Hyun respected most, because he'd have crawled on the ground and hidden for over 10 hours just to reach the monster's outpost. Currently, there were 2 guards outside, and Kang Hyun wondered if he should just charge at them. Being hidden for over 10 hours on the ground, Kang Hyun's body was extremely uncomfortable. There were also bugs crawling all over him. Kang Hyun's patience was nearly broken when one of the guards headed towards him to relieve himself, coincidentally stepping on him. Losing his temper, Kang Hyun charged forward and beheaded his opponent. The commotion attracted many monsters. Unafraid of death, Kang Hyun laughed loudly as everything had become chaotic. He was ready to unleash the words he had long suppressed. He shouted for all to come at him. The outcome of his recklessness was death. Entering the second round, Kang Hyun was armed with more experience. From the first round, he had learned from his 10-hour crawl. Now he knew the timing of the Gurkha warriors' hunting trips, who only returned at sunset. This meant that only weaker forces remained in the camp. After eliminating the weaklings outside, Kang Hyun marched straight to the leader's room and yelled out to call the cursed leader Gurkha. Instantly, Kang Hyun was hit by an enemy's binding magic, rendering him immobile. He wondered to himself if the guide also included magic. There must be a way out. Kang Hyun tried activating Lion's Roar next to break the magic. Freeing himself from the spell, he laughed loudly, praising his opponent's plan but declaring it was time for his head to fall. The system congratulated Kang Hyun for completing Stage 3 and awarded him physical recovery. He had completed this stage in just 2 days. Considering it took him a week to surpass Stage 2, this was a remarkable improvement. With such growth, Kang Hyun concluded that he was a genius. Emboldened, he thought he could complete Stage 4 in mere minutes. He then imagined his joy after completing Stage 4, but suddenly realized he was just fantasizing as if it was a month ago. 25 days had passed since a special awakened force was deployed to conquer the dungeon. 40% of the dungeons found had been conquered. The awakened continued to join in the dungeon conquering activities, and in gratitude, the government was considering rewards. Back at Kang Hyun's house, Kang Hyun was cooking in the kitchen when she heard her brother continuously shouting. She went to his room to remind him that the neighbors might complain if he kept that up. Kang Hyun opened his door to let his sister know that he had just beaten them all. Kang Hyun returned to the kitchen, muttering that her brother was out of control. Turning back to look at her brother's face under the light, Kang Hyun gasped and asked what had happened in his dream. His face looked terrifying. At dinner, Kang Hyun's face still bore a fierce expression. His sister, sitting opposite him, asked why he had been like this since the morning. He replied that the guy was irritating him. In Stage 4 of the system, it resembled a group project requiring players to demonstrate leadership skills. Specifically, Stage 4 required proving the ability to lead others, with the main objective being to destroy the core of the dungeon. The task involved leading a team to demolish the dungeon's core. It was like a role-playing game where team members acted like NPCs, performing assigned roles. The team often argued about whether to advance or retreat due to insufficient supplies to recklessly continue the mission. Despite the objections of some, they pressed on. Initially, Kang Hyun led them very effectively. He boosted morale with Roar of Outrage and led the team with the superior healing power of intermediate body regeneration. This ability allowed him to regenerate and heal bodily injuries with magic. Kang Hyun listened intently as her brother recounted the tale. She wondered what could have caused him to lose a whole month. Kang Hyun angrily shouted that those bastards were supposed to take turns patrolling, but they planned to escape together instead. When he discovered them, they ambushed and killed him. This resulted in the same characters and similar scenarios being repeatedly played out in each part. Under those harsh conditions, Kang Hyun finally found a breakthrough with his super intellect. He simply needed to eliminate the traitors and continue. Back in the dungeon for Stage 4, the people argued again about whether to retreat or advance. But this last time, Kang Hyun directly used his sword to kill those who objected. His fierce face warned the rest that from now on they must obey him. Resistance would mean death, as would complaints. Seeing the people in front of him terrified, Kang Hyun told them to trust and follow him. He knew what to do. Only when they reached the dungeon's final destination did everyone look at each other in astonishment, exclaiming that Kang Hyun had actually done it. After destroying the dungeon's flaw, their mission was completed. Upon reviewing the benefits gained from Stage 4, Kang Hyun was extremely pleased. His stats increased exponentially. Not to mention, he also collected items dropped from the monsters. Among the items, Kang Hyun had yet to discover the function of the magical stone, but he decided to store it until needed. His most notable achievement, however, was becoming physically stronger in reality. Physical workouts seemed almost pointless now, and he considered joining a gym. Just then, he received an urgent message from the security department warning citizens to be vigilant about monsters emerging from the dungeon. Kang Hyun immediately recognized the danger his sister could be in. He needed something to use as a weapon. Grabbing a kitchen knife, Kang Hyun rushed out onto the street. Seeing the monsters causing havoc, he couldn't help but smile. It had been a long time since he last encountered them. After clearing the monsters from the streets, Kang Hyun arrived at his sister's company. He smashed the glass of the office and entered, smiling at his sister. However, he was unaware that he currently looked extremely terrifying. Everyone in the office was terrified and looked at Kang Hyun, asking who he was. An elderly man loudly stated he didn't know who Kang Hyun was but questioned how he had managed to destroy the barrier. What should they do now? Kang Hyun, with a foolish smile, apologized, saying it was his fault. He couldn't control his own strength. Furthermore, he reassured everyone that they no longer needed to worry. Kang Hyun stepped aside so everyone in the room could see down the hallway where all the monsters had been killed. The people were horrified. Did he kill the monsters himself? He pointed at the monsters behind him and asked if they saw the weapons used by the goblins. He encouraged everyone to pick one up. Kang Hyun motivated them, unsure how long they would be able to hold out. However, as long as they did not panic, they could defeat them. Kang Hyun picked up a sword and turned to leave. Kang Hyun stepped forward and asked where he was going. He replied that he had seen some goblins on the way here. They must be on the upper floor. When Kang Hyun returned, he was covered in numerous wounds. Kang Hyun, worried, proceeded to clean his wounds. He asked her if using so much water was okay. They didn't know how long the situation would last, so they needed to conserve. She told him to be quiet as his wounds needed to be cleaned. After treating his wounds, Kang Hyun sat down beside him and asked why he fought so much. Kang Hyun looked at his sister and replied that perhaps he hadn't learned to fight well. Moreover, his abilities were so strong that he could take most of the attacks. But now he found it difficult to use all his skills. Kang Hyun reminded her brother to be careful, as if he couldn't use his skills, he wouldn't be able to resurrect. Kang Hyun smiled and asked his sister if he was cool, right? She sighed, saying yes, until he gets beaten like a dog, right? But she thought that people were starting to see him differently. There were even some seniors who asked her to introduce them to her brother. Tired out, Kang Hyun fell asleep in his sister's office. Thus, he entered Stage 5 of the system, where the task was to enhance his wisdom to overcome any challenge. The condition to complete the task was to defeat a succubus pretending to be a human. Kang Hyun thought to himself, isn't a succubus a dream demon? A creature that appears in dreams and drains the life force of men, famously beautiful. Kang Hyun looked around and noted that all the women present were beautiful. At that moment, a girl approached and asked Kang Hyun what he thought about succubi. Kang Hyun looked into the girl's eyes and responded that he no longer knew. At the same moment, his battle ring indicated a state of resisting enchantment. He realized that the person everyone was looking for in this level was standing right in front of him. Hiding in the shadows, Kang Hyun chuckled to himself. Stage 1 was a ring of fire, Stage 2 was a battle with the goblins. Recalling that Stage 3 involved crawling through a monster fight and Stage 4 was a month-long group activity, he finally could enjoy some fun after scrambling around like a dog. Kang Hyun restrained his smile and started to control his expressions because the one who discovers the identity of the succubus becomes a target. This meant if she realized who he was, everything would end immediately. He knew that if she was a succubus, she would definitely be a powerful creature capable of impersonating humans and mastering magic. Kang Hyun decided to go to sleep first and deal with things the next morning. However, when he opened his eyes again, he saw the familiar ceiling of his sister's office. Kang Hyun's colleague, who was about to wake him, happily approached as the military had arrived to assist them. Kang Hyun, uninterested and silently angry, thought that perhaps the succubus had recognized him while he was sleeping and killed him. Kang Hyun returned to reality when the sound of gunfire below the building caught his attention. Indeed, down on the street, several military personnel were engaging the monsters with gunfire. The young man standing behind Kang Hyun cheered, believing the monsters couldn't withstand the gunfire. Kang Hyun softly stated that it wasn't over yet. He was alarmed by a sudden dangerous feeling. A minute later, as the military started to lose ground against the horde of monsters, the situation became critical when a giant goblin appeared, dodging all the bullets fired at it. It began to approach and attack the military personnel. Everyone in Kang Hyun's company building observed the situation, puzzled about what was happening. If the military was also defeated, what should they do? Kang Hyun remained silent but watched intently from above. Team 3, after being attacked, panicked. The commander shouted loudly, asking where the person who was supposed to signal was and demanded immediate support. Corporal Jang Jae-hoon believed that after the signal was sent, a capable person would be dispatched. In the end, the person who appeared was just an ordinary citizen, which merely drove them mad. Kang Hyun arrived just in time to save the life of the third team's commander from a goblin. He kindly asked the commander if he was alright, acknowledging that they must have had a hard time being just soldiers after all. Jang Jae-hoon, terrified by Kang Hyun's strength, raised his gun and called him a monster. Kang Hyun cursed under his breath, urging them to put away their guns, questioning whether he looked like a non-human. Jang Jae-hoon hesitated and asked if Kang Hyun was really a human. Really? Kang Hyun, losing patience, asked if the commander was so surprised that he had to ask twice. Jang Jae-hoon calmed down, considering that this might be a volunteer who seemed quite strong. He bowed his head in apology for his earlier loss of composure. Kang Hyun showed understanding towards everyone, acknowledging that it was understandable since they had just escaped death. Hearing a word of thanks from the other party, Kang Hyun refused to accept it as he was not there for heroics. He was there because if the military were destroyed, then those cursed monsters would head for Ah Hyun's company above. Kang Hyun climbed down from the military vehicle and approached the goblin. Before leaving, he reminded the commander not to shoot as he would die if hit. He also wanted to take something similar to pepper spray from them. Jang Jae-hoon, showing concern, reminded him to wear a mask before using it. But Kang Hyun had already left, not having time to explain to him. Meanwhile, he loudly reminded them not to fire. All the team members began wearing gas masks and stayed alert. On the other side, Kang Hyun used pepper spray in the face of the goblin, catching it off guard before attacking. He smiled, whether a hobgoblin or goblin. They all struggled and panicked. His first goal was to take its weapon. The group, including Jang Jae-hoon, watched in amazement, wondering if he was an awakened being. Suddenly, from behind, a voice asked what was happening. Another awakened being appeared, thinking he was the only one called to assist. Meanwhile, Kang Hyun was having trouble. He had anticipated difficulty, but didn't expect to be unable to harm it. If this continued, his endurance would decrease. Seeing the situation deteriorate, the awakened being stepped forward and slashed at the monster to assist Kang Hyun. However, he felt no impact, as if cutting stone with a knife. He whispered that regardless, it was just an F-level dungeon boss. Since it was abnormally strong, it must have another weakness. Kang Hyun stood aside, silently commending the awakened being for his apparent knowledge. He spoke up, not knowing who the other was, but asked if he had any ideas. The explorer replied that he had speed but lacked the power for a finishing blow. Thus, he would hold it down for Kang Hyun to strike at its weak point. Kang Hyun thought to himself that this young man was showing off, even in such a critical situation, but he knew how to protect himself. Kang Hyun, weapon in hand, wondered where the creature's weak spot might be. The joints, the skin that was surely thinner. Upon attacking, Kang Hyun felt a profound sense of guilt as he looked at the monster, feeling discomfort on the handle of his axe. A sudden question popped into Kang Hyun's head. Was the inus a critical point? He thought it might be the weakness that could cause instant death. The decision was made instantly, and his body was ready for the next step. Kang Hyun knocked the monster down and continued to attack it. The awakened onlooker stood dumbfounded, wondering where such a strong person had come from. He wasn't affiliated with any organization yet. After defeating the monster, Kang Hyun retrieved an item. Seeing the awakened approaching, Kang Hyun thought that typically items were to be shared, right? But this guy had intervened on his own, and it was Kang Hyun who had actually taken down the beast. Kang Hyun only had time to think about running. He headed in the opposite direction, shouting that he had urgent matters and had to leave first. The young man called out from behind, but Kang Hyun was already gone. Several hours after defeating the hobgoblin, as dusk fell, the situation became more stable. The Kang siblings walked through streets that looked like remnants from a film set. Only after nightfall were they able to return home. Seeing their house devastated, Kang Hyun sighed and asked if he had forgotten to lock up. It was stupid to think he had grown up. Kang Hyun disagreed and asked why his sister always liked to complain about his handsome face. As he picked up his phone to check the news, he saw countless comments all saying Kang Hyun looked like a villain. Annoyed, Kang Hyun climbed into bed and asked his sister to turn off the light quickly. Kang Hyun clicked her tongue, saying she would turn it off this time since he had had a tiring day. Before leaving the room, she warned him not to scream early the next morning. She too had a difficult day. Kang Hyun smiled and told his sister not to worry as this level was easy for him. Tomorrow they would drink beer and share stories. Kang Hyun had no words to describe the reckless confidence of his brother. She didn't expect much but wished him good luck. As he drifted off to sleep, Kang Hyun remembered the awakened being from earlier who was quite strong. He wondered how many levels that guy had passed. Kang Hyun discarded that thought, determined to face the challenge because he believed he would become stronger than anyone else. As he slowly fell asleep, he whispered that the succubus from yesterday was quite beautiful, even though she was a monster that could kill him. But Kang Hyun was quite excited to meet her again. Things in the dream did not go as Kang Hyun imagined. This time, the mission had changed to invading a goblin den and conquering the dungeon. A tip displayed on the status board helped Kang Hyun to complete the challenge more easily. It noted that the goblins in the den had poor vision but very good hearing due to evolution. Kang Hyun was not concerned. What made him angry at the moment was why the content of this guide level had changed. At the same time, in a building in the city, the ability user who had fought alongside Kang Hyun was being beaten mercilessly. The man beating him kept asking why there were people as strong as that. He sneered at the young man, questioning if there was any point in being stronger if he didn't know how to fight. He felt luckier as it seemed there were still many more interesting ability users out there. Kang Hyun enters Phase 5, Round 3. The condition for completing this challenge is to defeat the doppelgangers hiding among the crowd, who eat people every night. Kang Hyun thinks that the monster that eats people every night needs to be found and defeated, doesn't he? It is similar to finding the succubus in Round 1. More precisely, it resembles playing a game of Mafia. It's still about using wisdom to overcome. Kang Hyun keeps staring at the status board, forgetting that he is continuously talking. He thinks that from now on, anyone who moves is the culprit. Kang Hyun forgets that in a typical game of Mafia, the one who talks a lot usually dies first. Kang Hyun is still surprised after being killed by a teammate. Thinking back, he has never won a game of Mafia before and never thought about this. He never imagined he would repeat the same mistake for a month and a half. This morning, Kang Hyun is wearing new clothes and glasses, sitting and reading a book. He asks if his sister's morning is going well. He then confidently tells her that he was born extremely smart. Kang Hyun, after getting off work, still sees her brother's pseudo-intellectual demeanor. She inwardly groans about having to deal with this mess after work. Kang Hyun explains to his sister that he's trying to change both his external appearance and inner self. It has been 53 days, and he has died 53 times in Phase 5. Therefore, he needs to do something. They say it takes wisdom to overcome, but the content is different each time. Even as a member of Mensa, he cannot win. Kang Hyun scornfully suggests that a brain transplant would be quicker than waiting for him to become smart. Instead of wasting money on frivolous expenditures, he should invest in soundproofing his room as the girl downstairs just installed a loudspeaker. Kang Hyun enters the system again, this time appearing inside a dungeon. He wonders what terrible task they have prepared this time. This time, Kang Hyun's task is to kill the venom-spitting Tuareg spider. He doubts that completing the dungeon is all it takes. The condition is that succinct. After many attempts, Kang Hyun finally finds a solution that even Aristotle would be impressed by. But unexpectedly, it turns out to be a venom-spitting spider. Despite the pain from the venom in his arm, Kang Hyun does not back down. Finally, Kang Hyun chooses to forcefully break through. Weaknesses or clues do not matter as long as he can kill him. Instead of looking for a key, he decides to crush it and move on. As soon as the spider is killed, Kang Hyun receives congratulations from the system and gains strength from a giant. Kang Hyun laughs loudly, asserting that brains are only for those who are physically weak. At a school, Kwon Min-soo receives a playful offer to punch a friend, guessing it's for his birthday. Kwon Min-soo replies that he'll do it later, as he is exhausted from the orientation he just went through. His performance in Phase 1 was indeed terrible, but he still completed it. The issue is about what's coming up. From Phase 5 onwards, there are no useful tips at all. A girl behind him steps forward, laughing and saying that just completing Phase 4 puts him in the top 1%. Perhaps those who have passed are keeping the information tightly amongst themselves. Kwon Min-soo shares that there's new information. Last night, someone completed Phase 7 and challenged Phase 8. Both sit down to review the information provided by that person. The theme for Phase 4 is leadership, dominating every member with strength. The theme for Phase 5 is intelligence, with muscle being the highest form of intelligence, so one should enhance their strength. Phase 6 is about ruthlessly destroying enemies and allies. Phase 7 is about sincerity, only destroying enemies. The girl, after reviewing the information, stands up laughing and asks, "What is this? Is this a bait?" At this time, Kang Hyun is at home on his phone, reading and becoming extremely angry at the stupid insults on the internet. He shouts out loud, calling someone a scoundrel, having tried his best to share tips, yet still not believed. Kang Hyun asks her brother why he is shouting so loudly. Kang Hyun complains to his sister that despite personally revealing and enhancing strategies, people still do not believe him. His sister laughs loudly and walks away, commenting that this old brother likes to meddle in pointless matters. Kang Hyun chases after her, asking what she just said. He waits and sees. Once he completes Phase 8, he will become the third person in South Korea to graduate as a guide, equal to Han Saeun, the leader of the Dangun Society, or Dong-woo, the president of the Power Users Alliance. Kang Hyun bluntly replies, mocking the comparison. How can he compare geniuses who completed it on their first try with someone who took 4 months to finish? Kang Hyun, provoked, tells his sister to be quiet. He also completed Phases 6 and 7 in just 1 attempt. In summary, Kang Hyun receives the Stage 6 reward, a B-grade weapon called Bill Gain's Longsword. This sword accompanied the mercenary Bill Gain, who made a name for himself on the battlefield for 30 years. Initially, it was just a well-crafted long sword, but as it absorbed Bill Gain's blood, it became imbued with a dark aura. The Stage 7 reward is Ronald's armor. This armor, worn by Ronald, a nomadic knight of the Kingdom of the Lost throughout his life, has the ability to automatically restore its parts after they are destroyed and repaired multiple times. If Kang Hyun completes Stage 8, he can use it in reality. He remembers an item obtained from the Hobgoblin, which will be revealed after completing Stage 8. Kang Hyun does not expect to pass it on the first attempt, but as long as it takes no more than a week. Entering stage 8, his status window asks what Kang Hyun's belief is. Immediately afterward, large cracks appear in the surrounding space. Kang Hyun panics as he falls into another world. He discovers that his body is being passed through by people in this world, meaning he is in an invisible state. This is the first time Kang Hyun sees the world within the guide system. Looking closer is not Earth because the people around do not have human-like faces. Kang Hyun suddenly catches the gaze of a young man staring at him. He wonders if the young man can see him. The panic in the young man's eyes indicates he is not looking at him, but at the monsters behind Kang Hyun. Among the crowd of monsters, there are some he has seen before and others he has never seen. The number of monsters here is on a completely different level compared to the dungeon Kang Hyun experienced 2 months ago. It's like a scene from an apocalypse. Kang Hyun remembers the system's announcement that there are 4 years left until a full connection to the Haken dimension. Kang Hyun wonders if Earth will also look like this. While distracted, Kang Hyun is taken to another dimension by a creature. A mysterious person asks Kang Hyun how he feels. He tries to see the person in front of him clearly but can't, and asks if the person is a god. The answer is no, he should simply think of him as a dimensional administrator. In this phase, Kang Hyun is given the freedom to communicate with the dimensional administrator, providing valuable time for both to inquire about each other's concerns. Kang Hyun first asks about what he had just seen and whether Earth will end up empty like that. The administrator responds that it depends on what Kang Hyun does from now on. Confused by this, Kang Hyun continues to question why, if the administrator is such a powerful being, he does not prevent these events himself. The administrator explains that, as previously mentioned, he is just an administrator, not a guardian deity, and his role is to maintain balance. The status window and guide he provides are the best he can do at the moment. Now it's the administrator's turn to ask questions. He is curious about the beliefs that have guided Kang Hyun and what he lives for. Kang Hyun finds the question challenging and wonders why he is being asked this. The administrator continues, saying that after observing humanity during this event, he has become curious. All creatures are interesting, but humans are particularly so. Kang Hyun, somewhat irritated, repeats that the administrator's curiosity seems pointless. He smiles wryly, guessing that the administrator hasn't observed enough yet. In his view, no one spends their entire life thinking about such trivialities. Instead, from birth, everyone struggles to become a little happier and tries to survive day by day. The administrator pauses to digest this information before continuing to probe. He asks if there is anything Kang Hyun needs to protect. Without hesitation, Kang Hyun answers that he must protect his annoying sister and parents. His family is his priority. The administrator then unexpectedly asks if Kang Hyun has ever wanted to be a hero. Kang Hyun, annoyed, dismisses the question as nonsensical. After several deaths, he has come to understand his place, and the glamorous but exhausting job of a hero is not for him. The administrator notes that while heroes certainly require innate talent, Kang Hyun seems to lack such talents. Kang Hyun thinks to himself, wondering if the administrator is trying to provoke him. He is then surprised to hear the administrator admit to being a fan of his, delighted to watch Kang Hyun navigate the guides, not knowing how much joy it brings him. Kang Hyun asserts that there is something wrong with the administrator, but suddenly realizes something and asks whether the intelligence theme in Stage 5 is a task that changes over time. The administrator, uninterested in Kang Hyun's question, declares that time is up. The status window then displays a message congratulating Kang Hyun for completing Stage 8. The administrator reminds him that the guide is just the surface. There are still many challenges awaiting him. Whether he likes it or not, Kang Hyun will become a hero to save the world. Kang Hyun shouts, asking to wait and questioning what was really going on with Stage 5. There is no response, only the status window updating to show that he is the 62nd person to graduate from the guide. Kang Hyun, unable to contain his frustration, tried to shout but couldn't. He suddenly got up from the bed and pulled out a sock from his mouth, angrily asking, "What is this?" Sitting beside him, Kang Hyun asked if he was awake now. Knowing that her brother would shout upon waking, she had previously gagged him. Kang Hyun threw the sock away and questioned his sister on the necessity of gagging him with a sock. Kang Hyun laughed loudly and replied that if he didn't like it, he should keep his mouth shut when he wakes up. She continued, noticing the look on his face, asking if it indicated his failure. Mockingly, she inquired how much time he thought this would take. Kang Hyun opened the status window for his sister to see, asking if she could see the strength of their brother. He thought that now he had become the chosen one. Kang Hyun left his room, telling him to go make money. That morning, she had also made breakfast for him as a special reward. After breakfast, Kang Hyun checked his status window again. The title he had earned after completing level 8 added 2 points to all his stats. He organized all of his stats according to the guide. Kang Hyun took out an item he had obtained from a hobgoblin, a moment he had long awaited. The item was a skill book that allowed the user to learn the magic explosion skill, capable of launching a magical sphere that creates an explosion. Holding the book, Kang Hyun joyously screamed. After 4 months of screaming in the guide, Kang Hyun finally reached the realm of silent screaming. Having received the gift from the book, he decided to apply to the Awakening Training School. Izan Mian, a newly appointed official, had her first job at the Awakening Training School, where those who completed the guide could receive certification. The domestic Awakening training system was considered to be developing at a phenomenal pace, becoming one of the best systems in the world. Currently, those following them were merely rookies, but would be heroes in the future. Izan Mian felt it was wonderful to witness the beginning of their journey. However, these were just her thoughts a few hours ago. Now the person in front of Izan Mian was Kang Hyun, whose fierce appearance made her tremble. She wanted to see his citizen ID before processing his school admission. Kang Hyun had barely asked what was wrong when the girl started crying. People around started to pay attention to the two, constantly speaking ill of Kang Hyun, who had just entered the school. Some even boldly took out their phones to record the scene. Kang Hyun, feeling misunderstood, said, "That's not right. Wait, what have I done?" From a distance, Professor Kim Ae-yeon approached, asking what the matter was, and went to his An Myung to look at the files. Indeed, Kang Hyun looked very different from the photo in his ID. Kang Hyun spoke up, "Look, my appearance has changed due to his skill, but it's still real." He thought to himself that it really wasn't fair. Kang Hyun continued, saying if the professor didn't believe him, he could take a DNA test or a fingerprint analysis. Kim Ae-yeon asked if Kang Hyun had completed level 5. He calmly confirmed that he had. Before entering the school, Kang Hyun had intentionally altered details to avoid attracting attention. The professor continued to inquire if he had ever conquered an illegal dungeon. Level 12 was quite high. Kang Hyun thought to himself that he had intentionally lowered it by more than half, but was it still too high? Maintaining a calm demeanor, he replied that he had been a few times before the law was enacted. Izan Mian then asked what the Force Mana skill he listed in his list of specialties was. Kang Hyun chuckled and said it temporarily doubles strength. Seeing the professor about to ask more, Kang Hyun, annoyed, thought he asked too many questions. Kim Ae-yeon, noticing the impatience in his eyes, said just one more thing. At level 3, Awakeners receive a skill. At level 4, accessory. And at level 5, another skill. He needed to see all these rewards from Kang Hyun. Despite his impatience, Kang Hyun rolled up his sleeve, bit down, and the wound on his arm quickly healed itself. This was the skill Kang Hyun received at level 3. A ring at level 4, and at level 5, a skill to transmit fear to surrounding enemies with a roar. Kang Hyun asked the professor if it would be okay to use it here. Kim Ae-yeon replied it was fine, he could use it freely. In an instant, everyone in the room had to cover their ears to avoid the noise. After the inspection was complete, Kim Ae-yeon instructed Kang Hyun to go to the first floor of the adjacent Gunmu building. On his first day of class, Kang Hyun continually heard whispers about himself. He was almost denied entry because he looked too different from his ID photo. However, after attracting attention with a fierce roar, it seemed he had already made a bad impression on everyone. Someone sitting behind quietly commented that Kang Hyun had bullied that girl to the point where she disappeared. Hearing this misinformation, Kang Hyun couldn't do much more about it. Kim Ae-yeon entered the class and introduced himself, stating that from now on, he would be directing training at the Songnam branch of the training school. The professor announced that the training course would last 10 days, including theory classes in the morning and practical sessions in the afternoon. Meals and accommodations would be provided on site. Unless there were any serious issues, everyone would safely complete the training and receive certification. Kim Ae-yeon continued, noting that as everyone knew, it had been nearly 10 years since the world had changed. Information about dungeons and monsters appeared daily, so tactics were continuously evolving. In other words, what everyone was about to learn was not entirely a correct answer. There might be misinformation, or the information could soon become obsolete. Therefore, the professor would only teach the most crucial things to help everyone survive. Kang Hyun, silently listening, already felt disheartened upon his arrival. After the first session, Kang Hyun felt extremely bored and wondered if this would continue for 10 days. A man named Kwak Soo-il came over to introduce himself and offered a handshake. Kang Hyun quietly wondered who this Jim Hob was, but outwardly, he politely reached out and shook the man's hand. Unbeknownst to Kang Hyun, the newcomer was looking for trouble. He wanted to put Kang Hyun in his place right from the start, having taken a dislike to him since he caused a disturbance. Kang Hyun didn't need many words to realize that the other man was looking to stir up trouble. When the handshake became too tight, Kang Hyun enhanced his arm muscles with magic. Kwak Soo-il, not wanting to lose in a show of strength when he had invested all his stats into it, refused to back down despite the pain, as everyone was watching them. Due to using too much force, Kwak Soo-il's arm exploded. Kang Hyun was summoned to the professor's office. He assured Kim Ae-yeon that the muscle-brained guy had approached and offered to shake hands first. Then suddenly, while he was tensing his muscles, it exploded. Kim Ae-yeon asked if he really thought the professor would believe that. Angrily, Kang Hyun retorted that it wasn't about belief, but about the truth. Thanks to his unique ability, Strength of the Strong, Kang Hyun was able to increase his own strength by 1.5 times, thus avoiding injury. Professor Kim Ae-yeon, after a moment of silence and contemplation, questioned whether Kang Hyun's ability was called manpower, and mentioned that it was supposed to double the strength, not just increase it by 1.5 times. Kang Hyun, hiding his confusion, responded that it might be a misunderstanding due to his poor math skills. Kim Hyun sighed, said he understood, and allowed Kang Hyun to return to class. Back at his seat, Kang Hyun felt tired and stressed, even though it was just the first day. At that moment, a classmate approached and asked if he could sit next to him, then introduced himself as Yusong. He requested to call Kang Hyun brother since he had just turned 18 and recently completed the orientation phase. Kang Hyun told him to speak freely. Observing Yusong's appearance, who seemed older than even Kang Hyun, his eyes sparkled with curiosity, and he asked what had happened earlier that made the other man's hand explode. Top of the pyramid, what kind of skill is that? Kang Hyun thought this guy was not normal. He replied that it wasn't what it looked like. It was just the gym hog's muscles that spontaneously exploded. Kim Aeun entered the class to start the second lesson. Due to the delay, he could only summarize the key points. The professor informed everyone that dungeons were currently divided into two types: regular dungeons and unfinished dungeons. Regular dungeons are more common, with their gates breaking after 4 weeks. As everyone knew, a broken dungeon gate means that monsters will emerge from it. An unfinished dungeon is a type where the time of breakage cannot be determined. It might open earlier or later than 4 weeks, so constant vigilance is required. There are 2 ways to prevent a dungeon from breaking. One is to complete the dungeon by obtaining the central core or main core. The other is to periodically replace the usual core to delay the breakage. However, everyone needs to be very careful with the attack sequence. A man in the class shouted, asking about how to handle the monsters, expressing his impatience with the seemingly irrelevant information. Kang Hyun muttered to himself about another muscle brain. These muscle heads and the earlier gym hog were becoming a problem. The assistant professor standing behind spoke up, warning that if there was any further disruption, the disruptive student would be expelled. Kim Aeun signaled that it was fine and asked the student to come down. The man laughed loudly, looking at the teacher, and commented that he at least had some dignity. Kim Aeun pulled out his phone and set a timer for 1 minute. He told the disruptive student that from now on, he would only need to dodge his attacks for 1 minute. If he could injure the professor during that time, he would graduate immediately. If not, he would be expelled. Both Kang Hyun and Yusong whispered at the same time that this muscle brain was troublesome, but also amusing to watch. Kim Aeun repeatedly stated that from now on, even a single scratch on his body would result in immediate graduation, otherwise if failure would lead to expulsion. An elderly man drew his sword and questioned the instructor about his identity, daring to ask if he would regret his actions. The assistant stepped forward to stop the instructor, warning that the sword was real. Kim Aeun reassured him and beckoned the man to come forward. A chubby person announced the attack to the instructor, who easily dodged, commenting that announcing an attack rendered it ineffective. Even if it wasn't a surprise attack, the element of surprise is fundamental to an attack's effectiveness. Kim Aeun continuously pointed out the flaws in his opponent's attack strategy, noting that, as in the first instance, overly elaborate preparations would not wait for the opponent to strike. Merely swinging the sword wasn't enough. One must observe and fully anticipate the opponent's movements. The opponent, failing to hit his target, furiously declared enough and launched a powerful attack. Kim Aeun remarked that using full force wasn't always the best strategy, as larger movements tended to expose greater vulnerabilities and were more exhausting. Kim Aeun effortlessly disarmed his opponent, declaring that a minute had passed. The class watched in awe, reminded of a video they had seen of a professional fighter dodging a punch by merely tilting his head, wondering if there really was a difference among those with abilities. Kang Hyun observed silently, assessing Kim Aeun's agility and reaction speed, noting that even those with enhanced abilities like his could hardly keep up. He pondered who would win if a match were to happen between Kim Aeun and the instructor. Meanwhile, the person sitting next to him whispered a desire for a match, prompting Kang Hyun to decide never to sit next to him again to avoid any misunderstandings. The training academy schedule included theoretical lessons in the morning and practical training in the afternoon. On the first day of practice, everyone was trained in weapon skills, and Kim Aeun encouraged everyone to choose a weapon that suited them best. Initially, it was self-training, with teaching assistants periodically offering corrections, and Yusong, after selecting his weapon, sought out Kang Hyun for a sparring match, but the instructor from a distance reminded them that sparring was prohibited until the 6th day. During practice, Kang Hyun observed that the average level of everyone around was much lower than he had anticipated. As he was about to engage more actively, a teaching assistant corrected his posture, commenting that while he seemed to want to show off, it was useless during practice. Kang Hyun, annoyed, grabbed the assistant's clothes and challenged him to a fight. From a distance, Kim Aeun approached and announced to everyone that a simulation fight between a student and a teaching assistant was about to take place. He instructed assistant Kim Sung-in to follow the previous guidance while Kang Hyun continued to wield his sword as usual. With just one strike, Kang Hyun knocked the assistant to the ground. Kim Aeun calmly explained that the weapon skills they were practicing were in preparation for real combat, training the body to react instantly when attacked. Thanks to Kang Hyun, he highlighted to everyone the importance of reactive ability and reminded them never to assume that what they were learning was the definitive answer. Kim even asked for applause for the demonstration provided by the two. Meanwhile, Kang Hyun stood aside, still confused by the events, while Kim Aeun helped assistant Kim Sung-un up, appreciating his effort and just wanting to test a few things. In his training journal, Kang Hyun wrote about his first day, describing how he taught a lesson to a burly troublemaker. He also mentioned a guy named Yusong who always acted friendly but seemed a bit crazy. He found the theory lessons extremely boring and the practical sessions somewhat ineffective. The second day was much like the first, with morning strategy lessons and afternoon weapon training, with Yusong overly enthusiastic, prompting Kang Hyun to decide to avoid him. By the third day, Yusong was still the only one talking to Kang Hyun, extending to the fourth day when Kang Hyun was extremely frustrated. During sword practice, he was reprimanded by the teaching assistant for taking 2 swords instead of 1. By the 5th day, Kang Hyun wanted to go home so badly he didn't even bother to practice and just lay flat on the ground, responding indifferently to the assistant's inquiry that he was meditating. On the 6th day, Kang Hyun couldn't help asking his neighbor why he wasn't causing trouble, to which Yusong retorted, wasn't it Kang Hyun who had previously said they should quietly complete the course? Kang Hyun snapped that now, whether Yusong got expelled had nothing to do with him. And Yusong, clearly annoyed, told Kang Hyun that he only knew how to say the same old nonsense. He reminded him that today was the 6th day, and they could spar in the afternoon practice session, suggesting that something interesting was bound to happen. On the 6th day, during the sparring practice in the afternoon, Kang Hyun easily defeated his opponent without flaunting his strength. Upon returning to his spot, Yusong complimented him on his performance, to which Kang Hyun nonchalantly replied that the opponent was just too weak. Internally, Kang Hyun wondered what he should do next, observing that the fights on the platform looked like child's play. Overall, the level of everyone there was not as high as he had initially thought. Kang Hyun, not knowing much about things like talent, felt that ordinary people couldn't progress through many stages. He learned that the sparring would continue until the 8th day and wondered why they had to keep up with such dull activities. The next winner announced was training Kim Chang-woo. Kang Hyun silently praised him, thinking he was quite good but still preferring to fight instructor Kim Aeun if given a chance. Next, Yusong was called up. Kang Hyun remembered the madman's previous words about something interesting happening. He had a feeling that the madman wanted to stir up trouble, but with the instructor present, he doubted anything serious would occur. On the platform, Kim Aeun announced that trainee Lee Yuri was a mage and would use her own weapon instead of the training weapons, giving her an advantage. The officer asked Yusong if he had any problem with that, to which he smiled and said no. Noticing the club in Yusong's hand, Kim Aeun asked if his weapon wasn't supposed to be a sword, and Yusong retorted, asking if there was a rule that they could only use one type of weapon. The instructor had no further objections and asked them to prepare. From below, Kang Hyun observed this was the first time he had seen magic in real life. He wondered if he could learn magic too if it was included in the training. He noted that the magical instrument the girl was holding had not been seen during practice, presuming it must have been trained separately. During their match, Yusong managed to injure his opponent with his first attack. Despite Kim Aeun being nearby, he couldn't prevent the incident in time. Kang Hyun was frightened, realizing that Yusong was crazier than he had thought. Assistant Kim Sung-in immediately called for medical help following the incident. Kim Aeun, confronting Yusong with a weapon in hand, asked him if he was aware of what he was doing. Yusong nonchalantly replied that it was just a slip of the hand, suggesting that such accidents could happen during practice. Kim Aeun skeptically asked if he really believed that was acceptable. Kim Aeun then lowered his weapon and announced a 20-minute break for everyone, instructing them to return to their seats by 3 p.m. Meanwhile, Yusong was called aside to speak with the instructor privately. As they left, Kang Hyun's attention was drawn to Kim Aeun's familiar dagger. It was the same one used in a fight against a hobgoblin alongside him. Despite the incident, the practice session continued for the next 2 days, and Yusong was not expelled but continued to train as usual, though now under the vigilant watch of the instructors and assistants and with healers present. By the 8th day, no further incidents had occurred. Kang Hyun had initially decided to let things go but didn't want to miss this opportunity. He went to Kim Aeun's office, seeking a real sword fight with him since the training was almost over. Kim Aeun, holding his forehead, remarked that the graduation ceremony was in 2 days and questioned whether Kang Hyun really couldn't let things go peacefully. He also noted how exhausting being an instructor already was and warned Kang Hyun not to enter the instructor's room uninvited in the future. Kang Hyun, looking seriously at the instructor, commented that the training felt somewhat boring. He continued by asking Kim Aeun if he didn't feel restless, just wanting to sit around and file paperwork all day, and importantly, reminding him that they had met before. Kim Aeun acknowledged that the person he had encountered before was indeed Kang Hyun. He thanked him, although belatedly, for helping minimize damage during their previous encounter. On the battlefield, Kang Hyun held his weapon casually and then, as if realizing something, wondered if Kim Aeon had noticed him taking an item. Suddenly, Kim Aeon inquired whether Kang Hyun had completed Stage 5, remarking on the impressive sword in his possession, which he identified as a reward from Stage 6. Kang Hyun fabricated a story about finding it during a conquest, to which Kim Aeon responded with a compliment for a good excuse. It seemed that Kang Hyun was reluctant to answer any more questions, so Kim Aeon decided to respond with something he had also found during his conquests. Kang Hyun, despite being caught off guard, easily dodged the attack, earning genuine admiration from Kim Aeon. Kim had thought Kang Hyun was only focused on strength, but his speed was equally impressive. Kang Hyun reminded him that focusing on just one aspect would weaken him. He also mentioned his recovery skills, encouraging Kim Aeon to use his full strength. Kim Aeon agreed, acknowledging that there was no need to hold back anymore, especially after seeing Kang Hyun's astonishing physical power. The practice match continued with high spirits as Kim Aeon realized that Kang Hyun's recovery abilities seemed to match his own. Wanting to escalate the challenge, Kim Aeon attempted a strike that was supposedly unavoidable, but Kang Hyun blocked it effortlessly. Surprised that his attack couldn't penetrate, Kim Aeon found himself caught by Kang Hyun, who quickly retaliated with a strong tap to Kim's forehead, leading to Kim admitting defeat on the ground. Throughout the match, the instructor couldn't stop praising Kang Hyun for his strength, to which Kang Hyun humbly responded that Kim was strong as well. Officially, the sparring was a draw since they had agreed not to use skills, but Kang Hyun had apparently used his anyway. Kim Aeon, with a loud laugh, teased about the outcome, suggesting that Kang Hyun was the winner since he was disqualified for breaking the rules. Kang Hyun, slightly annoyed, argued that he couldn't deactivate his passive skills. As Kim Aeon got up to leave the field, he didn't forget to thank Kang Hyun, saying he felt better now. He told Kang Hyun to rest up because they had a dungeon conquest scheduled for the next day. The dungeon was owned by the Awakening Training School and was strictly monitored. Unauthorized entry would lead to immediate reporting and prosecution. That night, unbeknownst to others, a figure cloaked in a black hooded robe made their way into the dungeon. The following morning, Kim Aeon led the trainees to a location designed like a dungeon for educational purposes by the Awakening Ability Training School. This was the F-level Forest of Jekka dungeon. Inside, the Haika monster that appeared was stronger than the monsters typically found in normal F-level dungeons. However, there were two reasons why this place was designed as an educational dungeon. Firstly, it was a battlefield-type dungeon, filled with various traps, though none were more dangerous than the monsters. Secondly, since Jekka did not live in packs, it was possible for individuals to lure and deal with them one at a time. Kim Aeon mentioned that more detailed explanations would be provided once inside the dungeon. Kang Hyun, peering inside, thought to himself that this was his first real entry into a dungeon, since the orientation part began in one. He had never passed through a door like this before and felt a light, floating sensation as he moved through it. Upon opening his eyes again, the scenery had completely changed. The trainees were astounded by the forest within the dungeon. Kang Hyun quietly asked in Yusong whether they could return to their original location if they went back through the gate they had just passed, and Yusong reassured him that they could return. Annoyed, Kang Hyun turned away and told him not to talk to him anymore as he did not want to be seen as crazy, and Yusong laughed loudly, pointing out that Kang Hyun had been the one to start the conversation. On the other side, Kim Aeon began to speak, announcing that the assistant instructor would lure Jekka and demonstrate the technique. Then, everyone would hunt a monster in groups of 5, reminding them to move to a spacious area that was easier to fight in. As they moved, Kim Aeon further explained about Jekka. Jekka was a bird-like monster, slightly over 2 meters tall, resembling an ostrich. Its distinctive features were its agile legs and strong beak, which could break armor. Because it was potentially lethal, extreme caution was necessary. The strategy was for several people to surround it to immobilize its legs. Kim Aeon paused his explanation as the system simultaneously signaled that the core of the dungeon had been removed and the exit gate opened. The dungeon was about to collapse. The surrounding scenes seemed to crack like a breaking mirror, causing panic among the trainees. Kim Aeon loudly instructed everyone not to panic and to exit through the door one at a time. They were urged not to push each other, needing to get out before the dungeon completely collapsed. However, there was still enough time, so everyone was instructed to move in order. Outside the gate, everyone harbored their own doubts, unsure of what had just occurred. Hadn't the announcement stated that the core had been removed? Wasn't the dungeon supposed to be complete? Outside, Kim Aeon counted the trainees, relieved that everyone had made it out safely. He wondered who had completed the dungeon. As the dungeon continued to collapse, a large number of monsters began escaping. Kim Aeon ordered the assistants to quickly evacuate the trainees from the area. Kang Hyun called out, asking Kim Aeon what was happening. He replied that trainee Kang Hyun was in the right place at the right time. This was a dungeon breach situation, where the trainee support was needed at the front lines. Kang Hyun, confused, asked again about the dungeon breaking. Kim A impatiently explained that if a dungeon is destroyed or its core removed without defeating the boss monster, the remaining monsters will overflow through the gate. The instructor asked, "Had me learn this theory in class?" They no longer had much time left as Gecko was about to break out. He approached and asked if that was magic. Kang Hyun smiled mysteriously and replied that it was a secret. More importantly, he told him to look behind, as a mutated Jekka had appeared. It was a boss monster. Kim Eun anxiously noted that reinforcements had still not arrived. Although Kang Hyun had faced a boss before, the gigantic body of the monster presented a significant problem. Kim Eun's worries grew as this was the first time the two of them were fighting a real monster together. However, he was unaware that at that moment the two were actually competing over the newly appeared monster. And Yusong laughingly said that the monster was his, urging his younger brother to let him have it. Kang Hyun firmly responded that it belonged to him. After this event concluded, it was also the graduation ceremony for the trainees the following day. That evening, after returning from the dungeon, Kim Eun went to see Han Sayan, the leader of the Danon Guild. She asked if there had been an incident during that day's dungeon training. Kim Eun confirmed that someone had broken into the dungeon and deliberately triggered a dungeon explosion. According to reports, this was an act of dungeon terrorism that had been occurring for a month. Han Sayan continued, asking if there were any stand-up trainees. Kim Eun immediately responded that there were two. They were the ones who had defeated the mutated boss Gekka. One was a trainee with exceptional physical strength. His speed and agility were at monster levels, but his greatest strength was his incredible recovery ability. Not only was he durable, but his fearlessness in the face of injury led to unpredictable tactics that troubled their enemies. The other was a different type, a genius in combat with remarkable reaction speed and effective techniques. However, his violent nature was his biggest limitation. Han Sayan interrupted the instructor, noting how rare it was for him to praise others so much. She asked if he had proposed recruiting them yet. Kim Eun replied that it would be illegal for him as an instructor to do so. Han Sayan complained about his always being so rigid. The instructor retorted that it was normal for employees to resemble their boss. Returning to the main issue, Han Sayan seriously stated that it was good to become an instructor, but urged him to return to the guild soon, as there was something strange about this incident. At the graduation ceremony the next morning, the principal thanked everyone for their hard work over the days. He hoped they would become great people. Sitting below, Kang Hyun wondered if that man was the principal. He had seen Kim Eun so frequently that he thought he was the highest authority. As Kang Hyun and In Yusong left the school gate, Kang Hyun discovered that In Yusong was actually a wealthy heir who had been born with a silver spoon. Outside, a flashy car was waiting, along with a butler. And Yusong urged Kang Hyun to hurry into the car, offering him a ride home. Just as Kang Hyun was about to get in, Kim Eun called out to him from behind. Kang Hyun laughed and asked if Kim came to say goodbye, teasing that he didn't expect him to be so sentimental. Kim Eun sighed and replied it wasn't exactly a goodbye, but let it be considered as such. His main purpose was to inform them about the dungeon explosion incident from the previous day. He announced that the rewards for completing the dungeon would soon be delivered to both of them. Kim Eun emphasized that they would be in touch again soon. Kang Hyun was not satisfied, questioning if Kim only came to say that. He expected at least some well wishes. Kim Eun paused, turned back, and told Kang Hyun that he was truly strong and would even become stronger. He was sure they would meet again in a dungeon, but reminded Kang Hyun never to forget the responsibilities of a power user now that he was one. After returning home, Kang Hyun playfully stuck his power user certification on his forehead and asked his sister, Kang Hyun, if she could see his potential. She, absorbed in her phone, replied affirmatively, acknowledging his achievement. He jokingly warned his sister not to act too cocky anymore, declaring that from the next day he would conquer every dungeon. Kang Hyun whispered to himself, wondering how to conquer dungeons. Would they just appear on a map? Kang Hyun, lying on the couch, reminded him about the radar app for power users, suggesting everything he needed was probably inside it. Seeing her brother excitedly run off, Kang Hyun was amused, reflecting on how he used to play many online games, yet seemed to be growing sillier by the day. Kang Hyun focused on the app, which contained dungeon maps, monster information, and options for team recruitment. He thought to himself that he needed to earn a lot of money to show off to their mother. He learned that the reward for conquering the lowest-ranked dungeon was about 20 million won. Moreover, mana stones, a new energy source dropped by monsters, were incredibly valuable. When Kang Hyun's parents back in the countryside heard about their son receiving his certification, he also sent his mother 10 million won as spending money. His father laughed upon hearing this from his mother, proudly commenting that now his son was earning even more than him. Kang Hyun's mother expressed her worries, having heard about many people getting injured or even losing their lives. His father, however, thought differently, insisting that Kang Hyun should be left to handle his own affairs, especially given the alternative of being unemployed at his age. He also mentioned that television broadcasts had advised that entering dungeons required forming teams. Kang Hyun wasn't the type to take unnecessary risks. He just needed reminders to take care of himself. After all, Kang Hyun had always been intelligent from a young age. Kang Hyun's mother attempted to call to remind him, but he didn't pick up because he was inside a dungeon. His father reassured her, guessing that their son was probably sleeping, and suggested they call him the next day instead. He also reminded her to tell Kang Hyun about an incident that happened at the supermarket when they next spoke. His mother disagreed, believing the government would handle it, but his father questioned how long they should wait. If their son had a team, it might be better to call him. Meanwhile, unbeknownst to them, the squad of Orsu warriors was stealthily infiltrating different parts of the city. The next morning, Kang Hyun left the dungeon and returned to his car, pondering whether he should venture into an E-rank dungeon that same day or if he had done enough already. He ultimately decided it was better to be cautious, especially since he wasn't sure if the resurrection feature was applicable in real life. Kang Hyun decided to put all this aside for now, intending to go home, get some sleep, and then enjoy a beef dinner with his sister. When he finally checked his phone, he was momentarily panicked to see numerous missed calls from his sister. Upon hearing what his sister said, Kang Hyun immediately returned home. The siblings sat in front of the TV to learn about the current situation in their hometown related to a major dungeon outbreak in Hangre. The government announced that they were doing their utmost to find a quick solution. The Ministry of Defense, in collaboration with civilian power user groups, had sealed off Hangre City to prevent further damage. However, concerns were growing among the isolated residents in the area. In response, the Dangun Association declared their active participation in the rescue operations. Kang Hyun, watching her brother prepare to leave, asked indirectly whether he was really going. Kang Hyun smiled, reassuring her not to worry and reminding her of his training as a guide, and told her to wait for him at home. Kang Hyun reminded her brother to be careful not to get swept away in trying to show off. As Kang Hyun headed for the door, he told his sister not to worry, promising to bring their parents back soon. Upon his arrival in town, military personnel initially blocked him from entering. He showed his power user ID and questioned their refusal. Their superior, peeking out from a vehicle, ordered them to let him in, stating all power users were allowed entry but the military would not be responsible for his safety. Kang Hyun thanked the man and quickly drove through. After checking around, Kang Hyun learned that at least 5 dungeons had been opened, including an E-level dungeon. He hoped his parents could hold on until he arrived. He said if no monsters appeared, he should reach them within 2 hours. Suddenly, a large wild boar knocked over Kang Hyun's vehicle. He crawled out and cursed his bad luck. Staring at the boar, Kang Hyun angrily blamed it for damaging his beloved vehicle and vowed revenge. The noise attracted numerous goblins from the forest toward him. Kang Hyun grimaced, joking that in a past life he must have burned down a goblin nation because as soon as he forgot about them, they reappeared and caused trouble. Telling himself to move on as he didn't have time to deal with them, he quickly ran away from the large wild boar. Laughing heartily, Kang Hyun often remarked that the best revenge is forgiveness, brother. Just as he escaped, the goblins clashed with the wild boars. He stopped at a safe distance, laughing aloud, encouraging them to fight on. His car was already damaged and he didn't have much time to waste on unimportant matters. Thus, Kang Hyun continued running on foot to his parents' house, a task that was not easy. It was already dark and Kang Hyun needed to conserve his phone battery so he couldn't use it as a light. He regretted not taking the well-lit main road instead of a shortcut. While checking his phone, Kang Hyun sensed a strong force approaching from behind. Acting on instinct, he swiftly turned and struck the air, instantly killing a wolf. Kang Hyun, startled, questioned if they were the kind that could become invisible. It seemed he could not relax and sleep easily now. After spending a considerable time clearing the area of wolves, Kang Hyun climbed a tree to sleep. Waking up at dawn, he couldn't rest comfortably after a night of fighting, and sleeping in a tree was hardly comfortable. Kang Hyun made every minute count as he continued running towards his parents' home. Kang Hyun's mother was extremely worried, uncertain if it was safe for her son to come. The mobile tower was also malfunctioning, adding to her anxiety since she couldn't contact him. Arriving at the beginning of the street, Kang Hyun encountered a group of ORCs. He saw this group as merely a warm-up. He silently told his parents he was on his way. The ORCs were quickly dispatched by Kang Hyun, barely recognizable after the fight. As someone who had conquered an F-class dungeon alone, fighting a group of ORCs was relatively simple for him. If they kept coming at him, it wouldn't be too exhausting. Kang Hyun paused as he heard growls from behind and 3 Orcu warriors appeared. He cursed loudly, realizing this was an E-class, not F-class dungeon. Before fighting, Kang Hyun shouted towards his parents' house, telling them to stay inside and keep quiet. Kang Hyun's parents couldn't believe their eyes, mistaking their son for a monster at first. They whispered, wondering what had happened over the past few months. Despite some difficulty, Kang Hyun managed to defeat the 3 Orcu warriors. Things became more challenging as the noise of the battle attracted another wave of ORCs. At the rear, there stood a towering ORC general. Kang Hyun lifted his sword and asked if it was the leader, noting its dreadful appearance. He had been trying to conserve mana for recovery, but it seemed that was no longer possible. Kang Hyun used a significant amount of mana to summon a mighty roar, but the Orochi general was unaffected. It kept punching Kang Hyun, who then realized it was merely toying with him. Due to the excessive mana consumption, Kang Hyun's body was unable to recover. He even wondered if he could resurrect in this world. However, Kang Hyun refused to flee while his family was behind him. Driven to madness at the sight of the Orochi warriors climbing towards where his parents stood, Kang Hyun was finally defeated by the Orochi general in his last moments of consciousness. A while later, thanks to the arrival of the Dangan Association, the residents were secured and the Orochis were repelled. They first evacuated the injured and ensured the safety of the others. Due to someone managing to gather the Orochis together, the damage in the area was less severe than in neighboring regions. The leader of the Dangan Association asked if the person who held off the Orochis until their arrival was the man beside him. A voice filled with sorrow responded that he had unfortunately passed away. The leader ordered his team to take good care of Kang Hyun's body. However, when they turned back, his body had disappeared. At that moment, somewhere else, Kang Hyun woke up thinking he had died.